Hello and welcome to Las Vegas Locale. My name is Dan,
And I'm Adrian.
and it's time for us to go through the monthly market update. We're going to cover March 2025 statistics, see what exactly it's telling us for buyers and sellers, and then, of course, cover some of the big stories in the news that's impacting Las Vegas real estate.
Yep.
All right, so let's go ahead and begin. We're going to focus first on single family residential. To start with, in the month of March, we had 2,142 closings, which was a 2.9% increase from this same time a year ago. And that is on a median sales price of $485,000, which is a tie for our record that we've seen here in the city. So similar activity to what we were seeing a year ago.
Yeah, exactly. I think the market is kind of moving, slow and steady, right? Trending upwards, but it's kind of going the same, which sellers have to be careful not to, get overzealous with the prices that they're trying to get.
Yeah, in fact, if we compare this market with the slower moving one that we saw a year ago, I think what sellers have to understand is there's a very good chance that you're going to be giving some sort of incentive or concession to the buyer, right?
Yeah, I actually on the last couple transactions that I've worked, we've negotiated, up to $10,000 in closing costs. And the new construction, most of them right out of the gate are giving you 6% towards your costs.
So depending on the price point, there you go. You might be in a competitive market where you don't have to do some of those things, but in many cases we are seeing something similar where you're giving money towards what, like a rate buy down or closing costs.
Anything that they would wanted to pick rate buy down, design center, really anything. And mind you, 6% is the max they can really give.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Let's take a look at new listings. So we had 3,340 new listings in the month of March, which was a 22.5% increase from the same time a year ago. So a lot more new listing activity. What do sellers need to know about with that?
Kind of exactly what we just mentioned, that your competition is getting bigger and bigger, right?
Mhm.
And one thing to also keep in mind is at least a third of that competition is a property that was just flipped, renovated, and put back on the market. So really have to be mindful of your condition, your price before you go on market when you're competing with that. And you have four other homes in the neighborhood that just went up for sale within the last 30 days.
Yeah, I recently consulted with a seller who had some spots in their carpet and was thinking it's just fine, let's go ahead and list it. If you don't do the proper decluttering, depersonalization, and fixing up of those kind of items, there's a good chance that your home is only on the market to sell your neighbor's home, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be in tip-top shape in today's market because there is so much inventory that's coming to.
I also think today's buyer just expects that more,
Very good
right?
point.
It's not just, you don't have as many of those people that are willing to put in the sweat equity when they go to spend as much money as they're paying today, which is the highest price that anyone's paid in Las Vegas for a home. They want it ready.
Yeah, that's a great point. Make it turnkey. When we look at inventory, we had 5,416 homes available, a 63% increase from a year ago. So, again, this comes back to one of the conversations we keep talking about. One, if you're a seller, there's a lot of inventory out there, so you got to put your best foot forward. But what about for buyers? What does this mean?
For buyers, it's actually a great option, right? Because now they can kind of pick and choose. If they like this home, but that seller might be a little bit more, less willing to negotiate, not wanting to help the buyer pay his commission for the agent or something along those lines, you can just go to option B and option C and maybe D, right?
Yeah.
So again, there's just a lot more competition. I think in this market, while it's not considered a buyer's market, it definitely feels like a balanced market where you have to negotiate with the buyer and kind of help them out on their costs.
Yeah, you got a lot of competition for buyers, more options, right? I remember when, during COVID, when we were helping buyers and there was literally no inventory. Um, Doing a buyer consultation and getting what their 10 out of 10 home looked like.
Exactly.
Hey, we're going to be lucky if we get a 5 out of 10, to
Yeah.
be very honest with you. And those 10 out of 10 homes, we're likely getting 20, 30, 40 offers.
Yeah.
Here's the good news. Those 10 out of 10 homes, they are out there
Yeah.
and they're not getting flooded with offers right now.
Exactly.
In fact, those sellers are offering you incentives because they don't have knocks on the door right now.
Yeah, and I would say the only thing to be careful, when trying to take advantage of that, I don't think that means you can knock down the price by 20, 30, $40,000.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Homes are still selling at their top price, but it's with help through the sellers helping out buyers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so to summarize, We are sitting at 2.5 months of inventory. It's a 58% increase from a year ago. 2.5 months, to your point, still tells us we're in a seller's market. So this isn't something where you're going to go on a fire sale with all things real estate, especially if a home has only been on the market for 2-3 weeks or under. Let's take a look at the condo townhome side, because there's been a slight difference in a lot of ways what's going on with the condo townhome market. And we can explain why, but let's get into the stats. For closings, we had 570 homes closed for the month of March. It was a slight decrease of 3.5% from the same time a year ago. And that's on a median sales price of $306,495, which was an 8.5% increase from a year ago. So again, same thing like single family. It's a similar market to where we were at a year ago. It's a slow moving market for condos and townhomes.
Yeah, much slower moving market, which again means, incentives are going to be offered, and you can work out closing costs and things like that with the sellers as well.
That's right. Combine that with the same thing we're seeing with single family, where new listings, 1,053 new listings, almost a 22% increase from a year ago. More listings are coming to the market. So we've already been seeing condos and townhomes deal with a more balanced market than single family.
Yep.
And there's more and more inventory that continues to flood the market. So you got to be careful if you're thinking about selling one of these units right now.
Yeah, especially because then you have to think of price adjustments, and this is an area where people feel condos and townhouses are too expensive, and so I think that's why the impact is worse on that market than it is the single family.
Well, we talked about the reason why that sentiment kind of spreads with the condo townhome market. A lot of times, the type of buyer we see for this unit is a first-time home buyer.
Exactly.
And a lot of first-time home buyers, if they're first-time home buying, they're likely coming from a renting situation where their rent is, $1,500, $1,800, $2,200 a month, and then they talk to a lender, and what are they getting stated for a mortgage payment?
For $300,000, which is condo townhouse price, $2,500,
$2,500, $2,800, right? And so when you're talking about an immediate increase of $300 to $500 a month, a lot of first-time home buyers can't afford that. So that's why you see such a growth in inventory and a slight decline in the buying activities, because these individuals, they don't see the benefits of home ownership when it comes to an increase of $300 to $500 a month.
Exactly.
Right. Let's take a look at available units. 2,204 homes were available, an 87% increase from a year ago. So just as we're giving the warning signs for sellers, here's the good news. If you are thinking about buying a home, especially your first home, on the condo townhome type, there's a lot of options available.
Yeah, I mean, essentially that almost means inventory doubled, right? Yeah. This is where you're going to see you might get a discount on the property along with some closing costs. Again, I don't think you're going to, take 25% off the top, but you might get a deal on a property because they're just pretty expensive for what you're getting.
I'll say there's a very real possibility when you look at that amount of inventory going on, that when you combine a down payment assistance program with the concessions being offered for a seller, it's very realistic for you to buy your first home with little to no money in the equation whatsoever. Yeah, and that might sound a little used car salesy, like we're pushing the idea of buying a house, right, with no money down. When you think about the Great Recession days, people were getting into homes with little to no money, and come to find out they shouldn't have been buying a home. We want to reiterate the importance of home ownership, right? This is how you build wealth long term. And for many people, it is the right decision if you're coming from a renting situation. It's very realistic for you to see that in a market with the type of balance that we're seeing on condo town. 3.9 months of inventory for March, which is a 93.5% increase. But that 3.9 months represents pretty much a balanced market, where you're going to see exactly what we're describing to you today.
Exactly.
So going into a couple of the other big stories in the news right now, the first thing is this mortgage rate volatility.
Yeah.
You think about this past week where we saw some of the lowest rates we'd seen in months, and then a few days later, jump right back up in over 7% again. Right?
Yeah, they were gone in a matter of 2 days.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to understand this volatility comes from a lot of question marks around new economic policies being introduced. You have things like tariffs, trade war in China going on. It's all creating question marks, right? And what direction are we going? When you talk about the markets that influence mortgage rates, when there's so much volatility and uncertainty, people either, one, do things on a whim, which is why you see this roller coaster, or they do nothing at all. Here's the good news for you. When this volatility happens and uncertainty begins, we know the public, will tend to just kind of stop and not do anything.
Yeah.
And that does create a slight opening for you for thinking about buying a home.
People stop buying houses, and it's a take it like the stock market would happen when all the sellouts were happening. The right people were jumping in and buying those Nvidia stocks and everything else because they knew a few days later what happened. They made a ton of money.
That's right.
And the same thing happens with homes. People stop buying. Now sellers are a little more desperate, and they might be willing to negotiate more.
There you go. Right. Now, the second news story to touch on with you is this new option that's available to sellers in terms of the marketing of their home if they choose to sell their property. And that is something called delayed marketing exemption, where you can agree with your listing agent to have the house be publicly marketed and inputted into the MLS, but delay it being broadcasted through what's called an IDX feed, which will ultimately put the home on places like Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com. Sometimes a seller will do something like this if, let's say, it's a luxury seller and for privacy purposes doesn't want their property all out on the internet. Or if there's some sort of agreement with your listing agent where if the listing agent can sell the property on their own, they might go ahead and discount their commission if they can represent both sides of the party. So there's a couple of benefits to you if you're thinking about selling your home. But we do warn you, there are portals like Zillow and Redfin coming out and saying, if you choose this option, you will ultimately not have your home marketed on our platform. And so what that does is it takes away a pretty large audience of people that might be looking at your listing if it doesn't get to those platforms.
Yeah, I think it's something that sellers really need to consider if they think that is an option. Again, you might save some money if the agent finds the buyer and now you're paying a little bit less commission. But we know that exposure is going to get you top dollar for your property.
That's our belief here at Las Vegas Locale is the more eyes that can look on your property, the better price you can get, which ultimately should mean the highest net possible. Unless there's a substantial savings that is being offered to you if your agent is able to represent both sides.
Our particular situation, right? Because we've all ran into properties where we don't even list them. We sell them to an investor or something along those lines just because that's the right fit.
Right. So I think for us, this is not about taking a stance. It's more so if you are thinking about selling your house and you have an agent that's talking about you potentially doing a delayed marketing exemption, understand that that could mean you risk your property not being ultimately broadcasted on Zillow, Redfin, and Realtor, which will negatively impact the exposure of your property.
And I would say hundreds of other sites.
Well, that's what we have for you today at Las Vegas Locale. We hope you found today's information informative and helpful. If you're thinking about buying, selling, investing, or working in real estate, reach out to us. We'd be happy to support you on any of those journeys.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much.